An intellectual carrot, the mind boggles.
You see? You see? Your stupid minds! Stupid! Stupid!
Earth has had Santa Claus long enough. We will bring him to Mars.
I've been afraid a lot of times in my life, but I didn't know the real meaning of fear until I had kissed Becky.
One thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode 159. I'm Aaron Pollier.
I'm Darlene.
We made a mistake in our last recording when we said we had gone through all the Golden Age Universal horror movies after we had watched what was the movie House of Dracula, which we thought was better than House of Frankenstein, but not by much. We missed one. I have no idea why. I'll just put it up to me not reading the list properly a few times, but it was Son of Dracula from 1943.
It was put out on 20th of October in Mexico City.
As a release?
As a release date. And then it was later in the United States.
That's weird. There's controversy in this just about the lead, who is the son of Dracula. They call him Alucard. Yes, that's an ongoing joke in almost all these damn vampire movies, including Monster Squad.
And this is where it comes from.
It's where it comes from. The Alucard. It's just Dracula spelled backwards. The main character is the son of Dracula, played by Lon Chaney Jr. And there's an argument that's out there that Lon Chaney was miscast as the lead in this. I really disagree. Lon Chaney, we've said over and over again, is a very charismatic, very well-regarded actor. I love seeing him on screen. And to me, watching this film, he's much better than John Carradine. John Carradine doesn't ever seem to have the charm. He just seems to be present. Lon Chaney seems to actually go into the scenes and he seems to pop out of the screen at times, not like Bela Lugosi, but not as far as Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi can grip you out of your chair, seemingly.
Yeah, and so could
Boris Karloff.
Yeah.
Boris Karloff was fantastic, but he never played Dracula, really, did he? Anyway, Lon Chaney, totally disagree with the fact that he was miscast. Lon Chaney did a good job, not a great job, a good job, because it's clear that he's trying to not play Bela Lugosi as Dracula, because it is a different character, but he's going to be compared to Bela Lugosi. So
Yes.
He's trying to do things a little differently.
And you compare a lot of these people to Bela Lugosi's Dracula.
Rightly and wrongly, correct?
So I'm going to ask, who would you put today if you were supposed to do a Dracula movie?
That's a tough question, and it's because making a modern Dracula film, you're not making Bela Lugosi's Dracula. Okay, now there have been modern takes on Dracula, right? Some of them have been, I'll say, okay. There's Bram Stoker's Dracula that has I can't even remember the people in it. Keanu Reeves is in it, but I would say maybe Keanu Reeves might be a good vampire Dracula-like character. Yeah, if you're remaking Dracula, do it, but the reason why I say Keanu Reeves is not because he's the best actor. He isn't. I love the man in real life. He's just a really good person, but he does have charisma, and he can pop that right off the screen in ways that Bela Lugosi could.
You don't want an actor that actually speaks a lot of lines either.
Yeah, you want an actor that's able to emote very well. And again, people might go, what the hell? Keanu Reeves emoting? He's seemingly very what? No, there are times where, given the proper character, he is emoting very well. You go back to the old Bill and Ted Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. That guy's emoting like hell. Like, he really is. It's just that he ends up playing these characters that are very dry or become dry through the telling, like Neo in The Matrix. Like, at first he's kind of scared. He's not really wooden. He's confused. He's scared. He's excited. But then he gets like the Zen-like calm, right? And that's not Keanu Reeves as an actor. That as a problem, it's Keanu Reeves as an actor properly portraying the character. So I know I'm kind of going on and on about this, but I think maybe Keanu Reeves might do a good job. Do you have like another?
I'm not too great on the names of, but I don't know, because I just, that is hard. You don't see it very much where you could have a silent and
A silent.
a silent a silent a character that is mostly silent, and when they walk into a room, your eyes go to it.
Yeah.
I would have said the person that played Bond one part, but he also played
Pierce Brosnan?
Pierce Brosnan. But he's getting too old for it.
Oh, Pierce Brosnan. You know, he does have charisma. He does, and I think he is a good actor. I think that's as good of a suggestion as Keanu Reeves. I think that is. That's not a bad idea. You go back and watch Remington Steele, I think he's pretty good in that too. So I know we're not really talking about the movie again, but it is a weird film because I remember seeing this. But again, because a lot of these Universal horror films have a lot of similarities, they blend together. But I remember the aspect of the swamp in this and how it is different from the other Dracula movies, right? And that's just a bare memory. So I don't really remember the details from this movie. I know I've seen it. Do you have any like distinct memories about this movie?
I don't remember it at all.
Really? Okay. So I guess it's just not that well played because it's Lon Chaney as Dracula, and everyone might start freaking out that Lon Chaney is Dracula. But wait, he's the Wolfman. How can he be Dracula? Well, he's not Dracula technically. Again, I'm going to call him Dracula.
He's Count Dracula.
He's Count Dracula,
but he's not.
He's Alucard. So through my notes, I have him written down as Dracula or Alucard, like back and forth. Yeah, he is the Count. He's like the inheritor of the title Count Dracula. So saying that is fine. What I thought
But
was...
keep that in mind when you watch this.
So there's a couple things that are weird going through this, and I think we need to touch on them before we even start with the plot. It takes place in the American South. Contemporary American South. So like
somewhere
1940s.
In Louisiana, I'd get.
There's mention that it's supposed to be somewhere outside of New Orleans. I buy that. You and I have been to New Orleans many times for family, and there are places outside of New Orleans that this would make a lot of sense being in. But I would say yes, it's somewhere in Louisiana, probably up by Baton Rouge. It's somewhere in there's a swamp nearby, but it's obviously above sea level enough
that you have a basement.
Well, a basement, quote unquote. I would say it's like a half basement, like half of it is above ground. Kind of like our basement in our house, that the ceiling is technically like 1.5 feet off ground level. And then the rest of it is underground. And I can see that because, again, there are parts of Louisiana, especially further north, where it's
but
above
the one
the
mistake
water
they
table.
did was they put county.
And it should be parish.
It should be parish.
Now, of course, that's also suggesting that it isn't Louisiana, that it could be Mississippi near New Orleans.
Or Texas.
I wouldn't say Texas.
Because they're right on that
I know.
border is very swampy area.
Yes, I know. I would say more like Mississippi, since people also suggest that it's close by to Louisiana, to New Orleans. So like Mississippi, right over by Sulphur Springs. I know people that are listening to this are like, "What? Why does it freaking matter?" It doesn't. But it's the fact that Darlene and I have been down there so many times for family that we kind of know the area. And while watching this movie, we can close our eyes and basically imagine where this really is taking place. East of Lake Pontchartrain, north of Sulphur Springs by the state border, kind of out where the Rougarou was, which would be a really cool.
The Rougarou would be in total swamp.
Yeah, but there's a Rougarou sighting that's by Sulphur Springs,
up in St. Tammany's.
Well, east of New Orleans. I know. Again, people don't care.
Anyway,
we can close our eyes and imagine this.
We laugh about all the places that say they're in New Orleans and then they have a basement.
Yeah, and it's not these horror. It's not these horror movies overall. It's a lot of movies in general. They'll be like, "Oh, we're in New Orleans," and then there's a basement. And we're like, "No, not really. Not in New Orleans. There might be like an above ground, quote unquote, basement where you have the house that you walk up a story to go in the main room,
yes,
the main floor, and then you go down to the.
That is
basement, quote unquote,
a design that they did out there.
Yeah, well, by your mom's
Creole.
house. By your mom's house, in her neighborhood, some of the houses that were rebuilt after.
Mom's house is on blocks.
Yes, but there's houses near her from after Katrina that were built post Katrina that have full stories.
You park your car underneath the house.
But there's also a block there where it's clearly there's no windows, there's no doors. That is an actual basement, a quote unquote basement. It's just that it's all above ground, and the rest of the house is just built on stilts above that. And I think that's an interesting choice. But again, it is contemporary South in America. Okay, so there are there's black servants to white wealthy people, and at first I was like, ooh, I don't know, is this okay? And you're like, no, that makes sense. No one is treating the servants poorly.
This is 1940s.
It's supposed to be contemporary, so 1943. No one's treating anyone poorly. In fact, everyone's treated with respect, which I actually thought was a big plus. I know that if people go, hey, I want to watch this movie, they would see, oh, there's lots of these kind of like, there's an older black woman that's like a housekeeper. I should say.
The only one I had a problem with was the first black servant, and he was doing that.
Oh yeah, like the minstrel show, kind of like the really racist minstrel show depiction of a black person. Yes, that might be the only thing in this.
Yeah,
it was, yeah. And I've never heard anyone speak like that. In real life, I've never heard anyone speak like that. The only time I've ever hear that is on movies and old shows that are minstrel things that are like showing history of minstrel shows. That's the only time I ever hear somebody speak like that. And I'm betting that they got an actor that normally did minstrel like those kinds of things.
Yes, it's. I scrunched my face.
Yes. So if people are like going, oh no, there's these kind of bad, it's
the only one in the film.
It's the only one in the film, and then every other black person that is in this film is actually, and even that guy is treated with respect.
Yes.
So credit where credit's due. I
yes,
guess.
They're all in servant roles, but
they're all treated well.
Their characters are treated well too.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like these, the one doctor, what's his name? Dr. Bernard Brewster. Dr. Brewster. Dr. Brewster's always saying thank you to his housekeeper. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. And I thought that was kind of progressive for 1943. Okay, so let's get into the plot. So we have the credits, and we were introduced to saying Lon Chaney Jr. as Dracula / Alucard. And all the way through this movie, I'm giggling because of the Alucard thing. It starts as a joke. I mean, the joke starts here. But it's a joy seeing people like playing it generally straight. Because it is such a joke later on. Like
it's a joke later on. They didn't.
We have a hand that reaches out to reveal the credits by brushing away cobwebs, and I thought that was kind of cool. And we get a train pulling into the station. And your first thought, you didn't have your glasses on at first. You were like, that train that they're on is huge. And you're like, oh, wait, they're inside a train station, and there's a train going past. And I was like, what the hell are you thinking? There's like this potbelly stove in there. There's people
Yes!
like there's spittoons. You think they're on a train? There's like a.
It's just like, we're on a train again. Remember how many we had of trains?
Yeah. So there's two guys
That's
there.
a common thing in these movies too. Is a train.
Well, yeah, because that's the vast majority of people travel places on trains here, not planes yet, not until after World War II. Because that's where you get all the DC-3s starting to come into service from decommissioned C-47s.
Not buses.
No, it's trains mostly.
Trains.
There are buses that start appearing more and more often as the highway system develops, but it's still mainly if you're going from A to B across country, it's generally a train that you're going to be on because the roads aren't that great. Not until during World War II to facilitate troop movements across the U.S. and goods shipments.
I thought they built some of the highways during the Depression era.
They did some, but I'm saying again, this is about scale.
Because that's where we get the
most of it comes in the 1950s.
Yeah, how the numbers go across.
That's 1950s.
That's 1950s.
That's post-war. There are some highways built, but again, it's about scale. These highways there aren't many of them. The vast majority of people can't afford to drive across country. It's a train ticket is cheaper than anything. In fact, I personally think trains are still better environmentally than planes, obviously, but it's very difficult to get a train anywhere in the United States that's reliable.
Because the railroads own the railroads.
Well, there's more problems than that, but that's a whole show that we could do just on that, and we're not going to because it's not Earth versus Soup. But yeah, we see trains, and we have Dr. Brewster, and is it Professor Laszlo that are there?
No, Laszlo is the person from
who's the guy that's there?
Hungary.
Is that Frank then?
No.
Then I guess it doesn't matter who the hell's there besides Dr. Brewster. Doesn't matter then.
Yeah, because I don't.
They're waiting for somebody. They're obviously waiting for Alucard. Okay, and we see his boxes were on the train, and everyone's like, "Well, where the hell is he? I don't know." And Dr. Brewster's like Alucard, and he's looking at it strange because it's
written downward.
Yeah, and it's very clear that it's Dracula backwards.
If you take it upstairs, you can actually turn it,
and it reads Dracula perfectly. Like it's the way it is written makes it so glaringly obvious that it's Dracula. Now, the problem is it might be glaringly obvious to us. To the people in the world of this movie, it isn't, because Dracula isn't a big thing. No one really knows of it outside of specialists and Professor Laszlo.
Laszlo
later on,
yes,
who knows the history of Transylvania and knows the name Dracula
and deals with the legends
Like that's so. Again, we have what we're saying is that there's actual plot in this movie. And out of all the more recent Universal films that we have, I actually have 2 full pages of notes on this movie because there's a lot that happens in it. This is not an hour and 5 minute long movie. This is an hour and 20 minutes. I wrote
it's 78 minutes long.
Plus 2 minutes of credits. Doesn't matter. It's an actual movie. There's plot. There's a first act, a second act, a third act. Anyway, there's 2 women that we're introduced to. One is Claire Caldwell, who is the younger sister of the Caldwell family.
Blonde.
She's blonde-ish. I would say like brunette. And then the older sister is Catherine Caldwell. She has raven black hair. These actresses, Catherine's played by Louise Albritton and Claire is played by Evelyn Ankers. I think actually both do a fantastic job in this movie. And hold up I can't say that they're protagonists or antagonists in this movie. Well, Claire is a protagonist.
The person that plays Claire, she's in a lot of the other ones, right? Isn't it Claire?
Yeah, Evelyn Ankers.
Ankers, isn't she in
she's
Frankenstein?
She's Gwen in The Wolfman, and she's Elsa Frankenstein in Ghost of Frankenstein. So she's in a lot of stuff. She is a good actress. Hold on, full stop. Everyone in this movie is good as an actress. Okay, anyway. we're introduced to these two people at a ball, like a society. It seems like a society ball, and their father is in a wheelchair. He's sick. I don't know what he has, and his name is like Colonel Caldwell, which fine. Again, he I don't know. He's like 70 years old. Whatever.
Yeah.
He clearly, even though like my first impression was, ooh, this is like the 1920s because of all the other Dracula films, 1920s or 30s. This guy's super old. He probably fought in the war. No, wait a second. He didn't. He's not a Civil War soldier. This is not the South. He's not Confederate, because he treats all of his housekeepers, again, with respect. But this guy, Colonel Caldwell, played by George Irving, who was an old man at this time, he's introduced as being sick. He's a little disappointed that the guest of this ball, the guest of honor, isn't here, and that's that's Alucard. Alucard was invited, and
by Catherine.
We
find out that.
Yeah, that's the next scene, because at first we see the bat fly in. A bat fly into the house after Caldwell is put to bed, because he's just drained. His energy's drained.
And all of the luggage was delivered to the guest house earlier.
Yes. And at first I was like, wait, what the hell? Dracula just came inside? No, he was the guest of this. He had already been invited, and it made complete sense. It's just that we didn't have all the information at first. Okay.
You missed the information.
No. It was the next scene that we literally have Claire and Catherine talking about how Alucard never showed up. He was invited. He was supposed to be on that train, and this whole shindig was planned for him. Okay. So after everyone goes home from this ball, Catherine just runs out through the swamp to talk to this old mystic woman. Now, I said it looked like she was in her nightgown, because again, it's one of these like Bride of Dracula, one of the Dracula's brides kind of costumes.
It's typical of the 1920s.
That silk white
see-through Hollywood.
Yeah, it seems like,
and she's in it more than once.
It's not evening wear. To me, it's not evening wear. To me, it's way too revealing and ethereal.
But it is an evening gown.
Well, we see evening gowns later on with both the ladies wearing things that actually look very nice, but they're not like this. You can see every curve of my body, like I'm on a.
But it's not
a Vargas pinup.
It's
art.
not. The sleeves would not. Those sleeves that just hang down would not.
To me, it came across as.
Yes, it did at first look as
one of the brides of Dracula from an earlier movie, where they're just kind of wandering around.
It looked like negligee, but it's not.
Yeah. So she goes out and talks to this old mystic woman who's Romanian, and the old mystic woman warns her that she'll be marrying a corpse, and that she has to stop Alucard. And a bat flies in and gives the old woman a heart attack, killing her. And there's some investigation involving this old woman dying at first, and how the cops know that Catherine was there because other people saw her go out there. And
that's in later scenes. And it's put in really nice.
Yeah.
It's not one right after the other. It is in...
Information kind of gets filtered through. Yeah, it's nice. So we end up having this society ball. Lon Chaney's outside. He breaks the fourth wall by staring suggestively at the camera. And I thought, okay, that's either a reference to Bela Lugosi staring directly out at the audience when he's like mesmerizing people. It might be, but I think it was a wink and a nod more from Lon Chaney saying, look, I know I'm not Bela Lugosi, but you still know me.
It's just...
It was cute.
It was nice.
Yeah, it was nice, because I'm like, oh, Lon Chaney, man has charisma, because he looks at the camera and there's just a slight smile on his face, and I was like, all right, okay, I'm with that. This is where I have all my information written down about like Dracula flying in and feeding from Colonel Caldwell. And he dies. It turns out that. Catherine has been engaged to a man named Frank Stanley. This whole story is a little tragic. that comes out. Like most of the time in these Universal films, there's some sort of like decent resolution, like evil is defeated and things are okay. This movie has a bit of a downer ending, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's all centered around
But it has a
Frank.
complete
It does. It ends
ending.
it. Yeah, it ends it. There is a story that is told that ended. So we have flashes over to like Dr. Brewster trying to research Alucard, and he calls up a person that is an expert in Hungarian lore, and that's Professor Laszlo, who says, "Look, Alucard's not a name, but it's something that was associated with Dracula, Count Dracula, and in old Transylvania. There hasn't been any Draculas around for like hundreds of years. They've all died out. They were awful people." Okay, and I think
And he said
he's trying to imply without actually
Count
saying.
Dracula is supposed to have died back in the medieval.
Yes, I think he's trying to say without actually saying the whole thing about Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler. They don't come out and say that.
He said that the last of them was 18 something in the 19th century.
19th century, and that's referring to Bram Stoker's Dracula book. That the last of Dracula left the castle back in the 1800s.
Which is what Brewster reads.
Yeah, he's actually reading Dracula at one point, which is weird, but also really cool because you get to see some of these quotes out of the book. And I didn't write down the quotes, but I was reading them. They actually kind of fit into the movie. And like, I think there's only one scene where he's doing it, but like the camera shows him reading the book, and you see the description of Dracula very well there. And it's like, okay, we know that Alucard isn't Dracula, but there are parallels here. Anyway, the father's dead, and a judge brings in Catherine and Claire to read the will. Okay. And the will says that the entire estate is divided between Catherine and Claire. And Catherine goes, "Hold on, Judge. When was this written?" And he says, "Well, it was after Claire came of age."
And she goes straight to a cabinet
and
with a sealed envelope.
And she says, "No, hold on. There's a newer one." And she goes to Claire and says, "It doesn't hurt you. I know because I asked Father to do this, and I wouldn't take anything away from you." And the judge, it's sealed with wax. He opens it and he goes, "Yeah, this is all legit." And it says that Catherine will inherit the plantation home and its associated Dark Oak Plantation along with its property, but Claire gets everything else. And it actually benefits Claire, because it means Claire actually gets more resources and money than Catherine would. But Catherine explains it as, "I wanted to not have to split the plantation because it would have required us to sell it. And I don't want it to leave the family." And Claire's like, "No, that's really good thinking. I appreciate that, sister." And
so this is what she probably talked to her father about, and why the will got redone.
Yeah.
But we also find out why the will
really was
redone,
because Catherine has been planning the events of this movie for years.
She went to Budapest.
Yeah. So,
and she's been acting funny towards Frank since she came back from Budapest.
And Claire says she has been acting weird. She's talking to, I think it's Dr. Brewster at that point, and she says, not only has she been acting weird, I don't think she's going to marry Frank. She's been blowing him off lately. So anyway, we end up having Brewster wondering if anyone's been out to the guest house of the plantation because he's seen all these boxes delivered out there. Catherine drives out to the swamp in her nightgown again, and we actually have a kind of a neat scene, and this is at night after Brewster goes out there and says, "Yeah, there's boxes out there."
You forgot one part.
Okay.
Dr. Brewster gets Claire to come into town, wherever town is,
Yeah.
He convinces her to come. There's something wrong here.
So we're out in the swamp, and this is what I don't really get. So all the boxes got delivered to the guest house of the plantation. Catherine goes out to the swamp, and Dracula's coffin rises up out of the swamp. Why would it be in the swamp? Wouldn't it be with the rest of the boxes?
It probably was with the rest of the boxes.
And he just threw it out there?
And he probably put it out there to keep it safe.
It rises up in the water.
And it makes sense to me to drop it down into the
water. So everything's in the guest house. He could have just hidden it in the guest house and slept in dry conditions.
Would somebody go looking for a coffin in the
But it doesn't really look like a coffin. It looks like a large chest.
It looks like a large, yes.
So, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me why it's out there, but we do get that scene of the coffin rising up in the water, and he doesn't open the lid. He actually comes out in a mist and forms into a person. I said, that
floating.
Looked good. That looked good. And he floats over the water as he comes out to Catherine. I said, that looked good. That looked good. There's lots of vampires turning into mist in this movie, and it looks good. For 1943, this is solid. This is a solid special effect. In fact, this is the first time we actually see a full body transformation from human to bat to human with the animation. So, and again, it looks good. It's not a shadow. It's actually showing like the bat flying out, and then whoop, it comes out, and he's the Alucard Dracula has his arms outstretched with the cape.
The first time he turns into a bat, it's a good camera. It didn't do the process of changing, but it did have a good. His cape went up, and then all of a sudden you see a bat there.
So we end up having Catherine clearly knowing who the hell Dracula is. Here, she's out there to pick him up in her beautiful car, and they immediately drive into town to go to the Justice of the Peace, and they get married
by a
Justice of the Peace.
Yeah, his name I have down here somewhere. Kirby.
So back at the plantation, Catherine seems to be fine with becoming a vampire. That comes across, and Frank shows up and demands Alucard to leave because he really does think that Alucard is in Kat's head and manipulating her, which he sort of is.
But she's manipulating Dracula too, you find out.
Yeah, which is actually, and it's well done. It's not just some sort of dumb, oh, look, this comes out of nowhere. No, it's pretty clear that Catherine has her own agenda in all of this.
Yes. You find out that Catherine's always been kind of morose person.
Yes.
And that she's always looked into legends and stuff like that.
Well, it's clear that she learned about Dracula when she was over in Hungary.
But I got the impression that she went over to Budapest
to find him.
To find
Dracula. Maybe. Sure.
Because she's scared of death.
Yes, and now she's immortal, right? So we end up, well, not quite, but here we have like the showdown that Alucard throws Frank through a door. Like, because Frank is in his face, and he's just like, get away from me. And then Frank like stumbles to his feet, pulls out a revolver, and Cat hides behind Alucard, which I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And then Frank fires this hand cannon into Dracula, and I immediately turn to you and I go, she should be dead because those bullets won't do anything to him. And
she slumps down.
Yeah, and then suddenly she slumps down dead, where Dracula's just like looking at Frank and smiling.
And Dracula doesn't care that she's down.
Exactly.
He goes after Frank,
yeah,
chases him all the way to a graveyard. And this is why we know it's got to be in a higher thing than New Orleans.
It's not above ground graves. They're below ground graves.
And he's laying in a...
Well, Frank passes out from exhaustion and stress and all that.
And there's a cross that's kind of open.
Yeah,
it's just
moonlight shines through it, and it forms a cross on the floor on the ground, and Dracula runs off without being able to really feed on Frank. So we end up having Frank going to see Dr. Brewster. He's in shock. Frank tells Brewster everything. He's like, "Dude,
I'm insane.
I'm crazy."
He can't even believe that he thinks it's a nightmare, but he can't, you know.
I must have killed Kat, which I'm like, yeah.
Which he says to Brewster. Brewster tells him to just lay down. We'll deal with it tomorrow. And he's up and out into the police.
Yeah.
The next morning, where it would have been a better thing if he let Dr. Brewster
just deal with it all.
Take care of what was going on.
He tells Brewster everything. Dracula puts Catherine in a coffin along with dirt. So it's clear that she's being turned into a vampire at this point. Brewster shows up at the plantation, and he goes into the basement and finds these like live chickens and dead chickens. Like Dracula's been feeding off chickens, but we also know he has been feeding off people because there's like wounded kids that he's been feeding off of. And Alucard just shows up with Brewster looking around and goes, well, what the hell are you doing here? And he leads Brewster upstairs to see Catherine in bed and seemingly fine. Perfectly fine. Obviously, she's a vampire because like she's super pale, the way they've lit her, how she's very kind of detached. And
they did a good job with lighting there.
Yeah, and she asks Dr. Brewster to tell everyone to just stay away. We are busy. We have research to be doing during the day. If people really need to see us, they can do so at night when we're not as busy, but keep everyone away otherwise. Okay, so Brewster goes home, and it turns out, well, a judge meets him for breakfast, and it turns out that Frank has already turned himself in to the police for killing Kat. He truly believes he has killed Kat, and in many ways, it's a completely reasonable assumption because it was like through and through shots of this guy. The bullets wouldn't have killed Dracula. It's not like his skin just stops bullets. They just go through him, really. And since she was behind him.
But I will point out that the fact there's no blood on the ground.
No, there's no blood. Likely she was already dead too, and she just played to the fact. But okay, so
maybe she hadn't been vampirized yet.
Maybe she hadn't been totally vampire yet. That she was like in the process of becoming it because
he hadn't put her to rest in a coffin.
It also doesn't make sense of her to pretend that Frank killed her because she actually does care about Frank in a weird way.
And this is where when the police come over to on the investigation, the first thing you would go is there should be a pool of blood here.
Yeah, supposedly you killed Kat right here because they go out to investigate. Well, the front door is wide open at the plantation.
Yeah, again.
No one's there. No one's there, and he's like, no, I shot her right here. There's no blood. I guess there's no evidence of gunshots. They can't even find the gun that he used because he dropped it in his panic.
He dropped
somewhere
it
outside.
Somewhere in the swamp.
Okay. So they go to the cemetery and end up finding Catherine in a coffin inside a crypt. And Frank freaks out. Oh my God, I did kill her. She's in this coffin. I guess Alucard put her here. And they drag him back to the police station thinking, yeah, I guess he is kind of guilty, even though they should have been able to look at the corpse and say, look, there's no bullet wounds. You didn't kill her, but they do drag her corpse back to the city
morgue.
This
is the county. This is where we got the county morgue.
They go back to the county morgue. All right. So we end up having more discussion about vampire lore. Alucard comes through the door as vapory, admits to being a vampire, and the professor from Europe pulls out a crucifix, and Alucard turns back into a vapor to escape. And this guy's, he's not Van Helsing, clearly, but he really knows about vampires and is so damn self-assured about it that he's got this smug look on his face all the time, like, I can just do whatever the hell I want to with Dracula. It doesn't matter. I know exactly what to do. We also get to see that Dracula has been feeding on people because this is where we're introduced to the kid that's been fed on. Back at the county morgue, Catherine turns into a vapor to get out of her coffin and then into a bat to fly over to see Frank in jail. She feeds on him. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She then becomes a human to talk to him. Now, all the way through this, the cops think that no one's in there except Frank, and so Frank is talking to himself in both a male and a female voice. Like, I'm like, you didn't even look in here to find out what the hell's going on, that somebody didn't sneak in past you?
The guy's got the thought of that he's totally nuts.
So she explains her entire plan to Frank here.
Yes.
And normally I would go, God damn, she's monologuing. But I didn't say this because in the end, she's not really a villain. She just had her own plans, and her own plans involved in explaining this to Frank, because she's like, look, the only reason I married Alucard is to become immortal. I don't want to die.
And I don't want you to die either.
And I don't want you to die because I love you. And I'm willing to pass this gift on to you. And I want you to kill Alucard because
Dracula.
This guy's evil. I don't want to be evil, and I know you're not evil either.
Because she doesn't call him Count Alucard.
Yeah, it's Dracula. And it's actually kind of an interesting take. She's just like, look, I just used Dracula to get this. He's a bad dude. We aren't. We can use this gift for good and stay together forever and love each other. And he's nuts. Right? Like, at this point, he's kind of like in PTSD.
It is.
He thinks he's killed his fiancée. Now she's back, turning into a bat and vapor just to come and talk to him in jail. She's offering him immortality. You can kind of see where he's not fully gripping
really
reality.
Broken.
He's not insane. It's just that
he's broken.
He needs some time in therapy. Okay? So
she has the plan where she tells him that before he should be able to burn the coffin.
Dracula's coffin. Just burn his coffin.
And he won't be able to go in it.
And he'll die. So Catherine gets him out of jail, and he flees. Everyone puts together where he's going. He has to be going back to the plantation or the cemetery, or and they look and see that Catherine's body's gone. Okay, yes. Fair enough. So they all go back out to Dark Oaks. Frank finds Alucard's coffin, and Alucard appears. They get into a fight.
It looks like an old sea.
They call it a tunnel, like a drainage tunnel, but it's not. Yeah, it looks like an overturned boat that is overgrown with like swamp weed and Spanish moss, things like that. But yeah, Frank sets fire to his coffin, and Dracula completely freaks out, like trying to put it out, and he can't.
And tries to use him to put it out.
Like, yeah, he puts Frank down into it. And Frank gets burned, but not like badly. And then Dracula starts to strangle Frank, and the sun rises, causing Dracula to become nothing but bones. In the same kind of effect that we see later on with like the House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula movies, where it just kind of like fades away into
and
bone.
It's only one hand with the ring.
So
and the sheriff, Dr. Brewster, and Professor is chasing Frank.
Yeah, and they see this ring, and oh look, that's Alucard. I mean, that's his ring. It's Frank must have killed him, but where's Frank going? He's going back to Dark Oaks, because that's where Kat told him to come, that she would make him a vampire that night once she woke back up, that she would just have to guard her coffin until then, and then they could stay the rest of eternity together. And so they run back to Dark Oaks, and Frank goes into the room, sees Catherine in her coffin, and everyone else gets there right at the end.
You want to talk about the joke that was in that one?
Go ahead, Darlene. Because I don't know what joke you're...
That they played jokes on each other.
I'll talk about that after the movie. Everyone else gets to the house after Frank, but Frank is looking in the coffin to see Catherine there, basically dead, because when it's during the day, they are dead. And he's like, "No, screw this." He
takes off her ring that is on his pinky, mm-hmm. and puts it on her.
Yep, on her hand, and then sets her on fire.
And he himself.
He walks out of the room. Everyone else runs into the hallway outside, sees Frank standing there completely like shocked and I won't say crazy because he seems like he's convinced that he did the right thing because I think he did. And they look into the room and see the flames like licking up out of her coffin. The end. Like, holy crap.
Boy, that guy's going to have a psychological...
Well, here's the thing. And at the very least, all the cops would know that he's not guilty of killing her. Like, there's no way he could have. Because everyone knows that these vampires were real at this point.
A judge would just go,
all this is effed. It's all.
You don't have a case. It doesn't...
Nothing makes sense. All you
could legally get him for is arson.
Arson and escape from jail. Even if they couldn't explain it, the fact is that he was under arrest in a jail cell and he got out. So you can say resisting arrest, arson, improper disposing of a body. Right? Like, there's no way he could be convicted for murder. I don't think there's any way he could have been convicted for murder. But anyway, he might go away for like a few months at the most, but most likely it would all be...
Brewster convinced Claire to have Catherine cremated.
Yeah, but that never comes about because everything else, all the other events of the movie happen. But yeah, Brewster talks to Claire and says, you need to get your sister's remains cremated. And she's like, okay, I will. And it would have happened. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff in this. One of the things that I read was Frank Stanley, the character Frank Stanley, Robert Page is the guy that played him. And Louise Albritton, who played Catherine, played pranks on each other all the way through this movie, which must have just stopped filming at points, because one of them was where Frank goes to see Catherine in her coffin. When he opens up the coffin, one of the pranks was Louise Albritton supposedly was just completely naked in there. And looking at that scene, the way the camera was, if they were doing that scene and filming they filmed her completely naked because the camera was like looking down into the coffin when they flipped it open. And holy crap, like, she thought it was hilarious. Good for her. He thought it was hilarious, and they just did this crap all the way through the movie to each other. But it must have actually
cost money.
It must have actually cost money. But let's be honest, it doesn't seem like it actually had any bad feelings with the production crew, because she clearly got work afterwards, and so did he. I guess they were able to play off each other well enough that they did seem to have a little bit of chemistry, even though they didn't share a ton of scenes together. So, fair enough.
Because she was doing avoidance.
Yeah, she was avoiding him. Otherwise, as you can tell, it's not disjointed. It actually has a plot. We both like the plot, right?
Yes. And I liked how they didn't just feed you the information.
It kind of
came in nice little waves and didn't...
Yeah.
It wasn't your face.
All the acting was good. It's one of those things that works. So the plot works, the acting works. I'd say the setting works. It's different than the other Universal monster movies. There's no torch-wielding mob of crazy, Romanian / Austrian / German people, like, burning everything to the ground.
Well, they did say that place was a dead...
What?
Every time that they talked about, even Dracula talked about his homeland, it was not alive anymore.
Oh, yeah, but there was some, like... I don't want to say racist isn't the term, because it's not. But all the talk about how some races were dead and moribund and static, but the American race is so dynamic, and I'm like
new,
and I'm like,
and fresh.
Come on, I don't. I would have said culture. Maybe you could have said something like that, but even that's pretty offensive. I really don't know what the hell they were trying to say there.
All I took it as is that back home, everybody was more scared of the stuff, and that
I think that's the one thing in the movie that just didn't seem to work. It made me feel uncomfortable when they were talking like that. like when Dracula was making
Maybe
that,
he can't feed on somebody that he's already fed on.
I don't know, Darlene. It felt a little jingoistic for, like, Americans are the best. But I mean, this is the middle of the war. This is the middle of the war, and some of that you can
new, fresh.
Some of that you can kind of forgive, some, but it still felt bad. It didn't feel right in this. It did not. I will say that. Is there anything that truly did not work in this movie? Like, even the special effects of them turning from into bats or into vapor, that was great. It looked great.
I guess the only thing that didn't work was that weird. Everything was dead. Everything was dead back home, but maybe that was also dealing with the war too. An idea of the war.
Again, Darlene, you're the one that through all of these movies has been saying this is escapism from the war, and they're not mentioning the war. So, whereas I normally am the one that's saying this doesn't make sense because this is the middle of the war and all this crazy crap is happening. People are just wandering between countries in Romani wagons and things like that.
But because they're dealing with it in the United States,
and they're trying to do escapism, it doesn't pop up. But in this, it makes sense why the war really isn't mentioned. Because it's not in Europe. It's somewhere in Louisiana in a weird setting.
Back bayou.
And it makes sense even why Alucard is here. Because he's escaping from the war. He doesn't have to mention it. It's just, hey, look.
Yeah, that phrase didn't, because it came out of both Dracula and
the Professor
Laszlo. And I didn't understand what they were referring to.
There isn't a lot in this movie that doesn't work. This was an entertaining movie. After watching House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula, we were both like, ugh, I don't want to watch another one of these. You even said, I don't want to watch another one. I'm like, Darlene, hold on. Those were later. We skipped this. And when you look at the movies that are like before this, it's very possible this is a good one. It could be a good one.
And it turned out to be a good one.
It was not a waste of time. And the fact is that we get a lot of firsts. The Alucard joke stems from here. The first time animation of showing a bat turning into Dracula or Dracula turning into bat, or the vapor thing, very cool. Because a lot of times when the bat thing is done like off screen really quick, like it pans away and comes back and there's a bat there, or a bat comes in and then like Bela Lugosi walks through a door or something like that. It's all implied. This is like the first time we actually see it animated. We've already talked about other films that have that animation with John Carradine. See, again, John Carradine does not stand up to Lon Chaney. I thought Lon Chaney did a fantastic job in this. And I don't mean to shit on John Carradine because he is a good actor. It's just that I don't think he's a good Dracula.
Yeah, he'd fit more with a professor than...
And he did do that. Like in other movies, he played that role, but yeah, it's just not a good Dracula. Lon Chaney at least was decent at it and kind of did the wink and a nod, like, yeah, I know I'm not Bela Lugosi, I'm playing a different character.
I said, I think they just tried to put too many monsters in those.
And couldn't tell a proper story. Because it was all about having all four or all three of the monsters. And that's segmenting stories. Yeah. But you can also say that
the characters, you got certain actors that you can have, and then you stick somebody in that acting of Dracula. Because you want... I can see Karloff playing Dracula.
Oh man, Bela Lugosi's ghost is like screaming at you right now and trying to tear your eyes out.
But he has the eye, that he does that thing.
He has the charisma. He has the
thing with the eyes.
Yeah, a younger Boris Karloff could have done it. Yes, I don't think he would have done it as well.
That we'll never know.
I guess we won't know. But obviously Bella is Bella is Bella. He is unique.
You look up to him.
No. He's a flawed human being, just the same as any human being. The point is that Bela Lugosi is engrossing as an actor, especially when he's chomping down on the role like Dracula. He's fantastic.
You've said this several times.
Yeah, Lon Chaney's great. I think I prefer Lon Chaney as Wolfman, clearly, because that's the role that he is known for, because he originated and pretty much played it all the way through.
No one played the Wolfman but him.
Yeah, I think, Wolfman of London technically is before his time of being the Wolfman, because I think Wolfman's 1941 and Wolfman of London is
35
or 36.
I don't know. I'd have to look.
But I mean, yeah, he reprises his role in Abbott and Costello Meet the Wolfman. But technically that people don't consider that canon to the Lon Chaney Lawrence Talbot story, because the Lawrence Talbot story ends with House of Dracula.
Yes.
Where he's cured. We've already talked about that. I know we keep going on about other movies, because all these Universal movies are kind of linked, and you can judge them against each other because there's so many reoccurring faces, the directors, the writers, and all that. You should be able to compare them. And while this isn't the best Dracula movie, it's up there with the first two. It very much is. I love most of this movie. There's only a couple parts that made me feel uncomfortable, but then again, that's like the first Dracula movie. There's only a couple things that make me kind of go, that wasn't that good, or...
So we're both recommending this movie.
We both recommend it. We both do. I think, again, the only thing that a modern filmmaker can really learn from this movie is always hire for the role. Don't just hire a big name and expect them to go into a role well, because while Lon Chaney Jr. did a very good job, he's not Bela Lugosi, and he knew that. So he didn't try to be Bela Lugosi. He just tried to be a different character. Did he succeed? Yes. Asterisk. There's some things that just are different, and that's okay. So yeah, we recommend it. I don't know what we're going to do for 160, Darlene. We've talked about a few possibilities. We want to do a classic, but we've thrown around a few ideas. So I don't want to give any impression to the listeners about exactly which movie we're going to do for 160, because I don't think we know yet. We'll talk about that today after we're done recording. So any final thoughts about Son of Dracula?
Nope.
All right. Well, I'm Aaron.
I'm Darlene. Good evening.
And keep watching the skies.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.